I want to bring in our good and longtime friend Jeff Paterson from Vancouver, longtime Vancouver sportscaster, to talk about that and other things. How you doing, JP?
I'm good, Rod. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. What's the West Coast summer report? How's the summer been out there for you?
Well, our forests are burning and COVID numbers are going up. So other than that, everything's great. On the sports scene, look, Jim Benning said he had to be aggressive with the Vancouver Canucks, and he has been. Are they a better hockey club? We're going to find out in about 6 weeks' time. But coming back with the same roster that was dead last in this makeshift Canadian division last year, that wasn't going to cut it. So they needed to make improvements. I think they have up front. I think there's some legitimate excitement in Vancouver and throughout British Columbia about their forward group. The addition of Connor Garland from Arizona, Jason Dickinson, they just got him signed over the weekend. They're going to insert Vasily Podkolzin, their first pick, 10th overall in the 2019 draft. So they've got three newcomers that I think people are excited about up front. Thatcher Demko has established himself as a number one guy, and I think there's reason to believe that he can get the job done. It's that area in the middle, though, the blue line. It's been an issue for really all of Jim Benning's tenure here, which is kind of ironic considering he himself was a National Hockey League defenseman, and yet he has just struggled mightily to put together a legitimate NHL defense. And so Alex Edler, after 15 years, he decided to test free agency and move on, which was a little bit of a surprise to those of us that have covered Alex for his entire career in Vancouver, drafted by the Canucks, through the system, and obviously became one of, if not the best defenseman in franchise history, was part of that 2011 Stanley Cup team. And we just thought that he was going to be a career Canuck. But I think it speaks volumes when a player like Alex Edler decides at this stage of his career that he wants to explore his options and move on. And you think of the COVID situation and the way it just ravaged the Canucks last year. And there was a lot of chatter behind the scenes that the players weren't happy with the way it was handled by the organization. Remember that coming out of COVID, they were supposed to play the Oilers and the Leafs on back-to-back nights, like with 1 day of practice after being off for 3 weeks. And the players sort of rose up and JT Miller spoke out. And I think there were some lingering effects just about the way the organization handled that situation and treated the players. We know that Nate Schmidt wanted out, didn't want to play for Vancouver, but he was willing to go play in Winnipeg. So read into that what you will. They made some moves here, and they had to. I truly believe that Jim Benning's on the hot seat. Look, this team has been to the playoffs twice in the 7 years he's been the GM, and one of those was the Edmonton bubble, where they were invited to an expanded playoff tournament. They hadn't even qualified to be one of the 8 teams in the West, but once they got in, hey, good on them. They made some hay. It was fun. People in Vancouver were buying in again. And then the follow-up was this past season where the bottom fell out on them. So on the hockey scene, it's been busy. The trade with Arizona, obviously, there were a lot of concerns here about Oliver Ekman-Larsson and what he is at this stage of his career with that contract. Yeah, they moved Louis Eriksson and Antoine Roussel and Jay Beagle out, but they take on, that's a lot of contract for a player on the wrong side of 30. And by most accounts, his performance has been in decline for a couple of seasons. So they're banking on a bounce-back season from Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They need a bounce-back season from Quinn Hughes in his third year in the NHL. He was so dynamic as a rookie. And last year, it was a struggle in his own zone. The points are there. They're always going to be there because that's how good he is. But you're a defenseman, you got to defend in the NHL. And I think there are still a lot of questions about, just how well Quinn Hughes can do that. So like the offensive group, like the goaltending, but like so many here in Vancouver, Rod, lots of questions about what they're going to put on the ice on defense for this hockey club.
You come out guns a-blazing. I know everything about the Vancouver Canucks now. And I appreciate that, by the way. But I want to sprinkle in a few comments here from the Hockey Club podcast watching in Tallahassee, Florida. Corey Paterson, a WHL star from days gone by. He says, Paterson with 1 T. I feel your pain, bro. Is that a thing?
It can be a curse. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everybody always defaults to the 2 T's. It's just, look, that's life. But I've managed to get by. But yes, it's a real thing, no doubt.
Tell me about it. How about the Danish spelling of Peterson? All E's, you can imagine. Breaking news, Tim Capper, a viewer in Montreal, says from Sportico, the NHL is adding advertisements to its jerseys for the 2022-23 season. Just a little side jaunt on that. I don't have a problem with it. Revenue's revenue. I do not have a problem with it. Do you, Jeff?
No, I don't. These people that freak out about the sanctity of the jersey. Look, we've survived. The CFL has done it for years. I think we're all okay. The NBA, they do it. So if it's good for the NBA, if LeBron and others can have a patch on their jersey, I'm sure that the National Hockey Leaguers will do it. We all got by with the patches on the helmets last year. Look, sponsorship, the league doesn't happen without partners and sponsors. And so when that first COVID, this first season was halted by COVID, you had to make good for your partners, and you had to find ways to get creative to do that kind of stuff. A sticker on the helmet last year, I was fine with that, and I'll be just fine. I will not lose any sleep whatsoever with a patch on a National Hockey League jersey.
Of course, it'll be something to be debated and torn apart, but in the end, the NHL is going to do what they're going to do, and I'm all for it. I just came out with my predictions for the Pacific Division for this season, Jeff, and people are arguing with them, of course, but I got Vegas, Edmonton, Anaheim, Vancouver, Calgary, Seattle, LA, San Jose. Could you see Vancouver in fourth making the playoffs this year?
I think a lot of things will have to go right for the Vancouver Canucks, and that's not to say that can't happen. But based on where they were last year, right now, Rod, all the talk here in Vancouver is Elias, Pettersson, and Quinn Hughes. And you can imagine we're still a month plus from training camp, but those days go by in a hurry. There are no pressure points, and it kind of feels like the two sides here have just taken a step back for the time being. So they don't need a contract in the middle of August. They need a contract by training camp. But, if one or both of those guys aren't around for training camp, that starts to change the conversation, because the Canucks start with a 6-game road trip. I think you want your best players available and in the lineup, especially when you've got to start like that. So, that's the discussion point. They need Elias Pettersson. He missed half of last season with a wrist injury. He claims to have the clean bill of health, but, they need these guys in camp, hitting the ground running from day one. They went through a bit of a holdout with Brock Besser 2 years ago, the last time there was a full season, although, he had a fine start to the year. And I think these guys are so good now and train so hard, even on their own, that, they'll be fine, but they need contracts. Can't play without a contract. So, will the Canucks be a playoff team? I think the best thing they have going for them is the division they play in, because there are just so many wild cards. I'm not sure that I can get to where you have Anaheim, but again, things happen, surprises happen. I think Los Angeles is certainly a team to watch with all of the incredible young talent that they've got there. If they can get some guys that can take a leap forward here. But yeah, I think Vegas is still the front runner. With McDavid and Draisaitl, I have to think that Edmonton is a playoff team. Maybe their goaltending holds them back. It didn't last year, but you're banking on a guy into his 40s to be your every night goaltender, plus in the playoffs. There are risks that come associated with that. But again, am I going to bet against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl? Not on your life. Not to make the playoffs at the very least. And after that, I think it's a bit of a crapshoot. And a team like Seattle, who knows what to expect. Obviously, the bar has been set by Vegas for an expansion franchise. I think Seattle's going to have a hell of a time living up to those types of expectations, but I'm sure they'll play with that expansion chip on their shoulder. And, it's cool. I mean, we've been waiting 50 plus years of existence for the Canucks to have a geographic rival. They've finally got one here. There's no way that the Canucks want to fall behind Seattle in year number one. So I think that's kind of going to be the game within the game here on the West Coast all season long. And I mentioned that 6-game road trip that the Canucks start with. The 6th and final game of that road trip is Seattle's home opener. So the Canucks better make some hay in those first 5 games, because that feels like a prescribed loss to me. If you have to go into a team's building the first time in franchise history, they'll be hanging from the rafters in there, fired up for National Hockey League action in Seattle. So that's going to be a difficult night, a Saturday night at that. But it'll be some fun after all these years for people to be able to zip up and down the I-5 if the borders, in fact, are open in both directions. Let's hope that they are by the time that night rolls around, because it's kind of cool to finally, after all these years, have a true, legitimate rival for the Vancouver Canucks in the NHL.
Oh, yeah, wouldn't that be nice? We've got about 3 minutes, and I got 2 questions for you. So the Braden Holtby era in Vancouver, how do we sum it up?
Yeah, it was tough for him coming to a new team for the first time in his career and also making that adjustment from being the guy in Washington to being a backup. He struggled. And his numbers show you that he's been in decline for a couple of seasons. All-world person. It was unfortunate in the Zoom world that we weren't in the room getting a chance to know him a little bit better. But ultimately, it's a bottom line business, and he didn't stop enough pucks. And so, I'm glad for him that the Canucks were able to buy him out, put him back on the market, and he landed in Dallas. And, I hope that there was a year of learning for him about being a backup guy and what it takes to sort of step back and play, once every 4 or 5 nights as opposed to going 4 of every 5 games. And I do think that was just a big part of the adjustment, all of it against the COVID backdrop. It was a tough situation. And so, I hope it works well for him down in Dallas.
You covering the BC Lions a little bit. I understand their home openers this weekend against the Edmonton Elks. Hope there's a crowd for it. What are you expecting this week?
Yeah, on the crowd front, stringent rules still here in BC. I mean, they can only sell 50% of capacity for BC Place, and for them, capacity is the lower bowl. So they're only selling 12,500 tickets, and I'm really curious to see if they can get close to that number. Again, COVID numbers here in the province are on the rise, and I think that that's going to scare some people away from a group setting. So I really don't know. Your guess is as good as mine on the head count. And quite frankly, aside from that first quarter in Regina, they've looked pretty good. Defensively, particularly, they've overhauled the defense. I think people in Vancouver and around BC are still learning the names because there's a lot of newcomers. But, man, they looked good in Calgary last week, keeping Bo Levi in check. And, to come off the road 1-1, especially the way things are shaking down around the division, it's kind of become a bit of a running gag here, and not just in Vancouver, but I think around the league about who's going to start at quarterback. Sounds like Michael Riley's taken the bulk of the snaps here early in this week. So, look, if he's healthy, he is their guy. But I thought Nathan Rourke acquitted himself quite nicely. You guys saw that in Regina in week number 1. But you can't be spotting opponents 31-0 leads and thinking you're going to rally and come back to win. So they didn't. I thought they put up a pretty good fight in week 1. And again, they were able to build on that last week in Calgary. So, 1-1, all things considered, after being away for a couple of years and no exhibition games, I think you take that with 2 road games under your belt. You come back home here. And again, so many questions around this football team, but we don't have to wonder how long it's going to take for them to get their first win. Rick Campbell has been waiting almost 2 years just to coach a game, let alone win a game. And so they got their work cut out for them. I think there are a lot of people that are skeptical of the team, the ownership situation, the league in general. It's been a tough go the last bunch of years here for the BC Lions in this market. But that 2019 season when they were 5-13 under Devon Claybrook's a complete disaster and a write-off. Let's hope that they have turned the page from that and that brighter days ahead for the football team here on the West Coast.
A wonderful Vancouver sports update. Jeff, real quickly, where can people follow your stuff?
Yeah, the best place to do it is on Twitter at Paterson Jeff. And again, we established Patterson with just the 1 T. And we're following your lead, Rod. We're branching out into the digital space here on the West Coast. I'm going to be covering the Canucks for the Paterson Price Show and looking forward to that adventure that's really going to get under on holidays for the next couple of weeks. And then September 1, we'll jump in with both feet and we'll see where we kind of find ourselves in the wild west of this digital frontier.
Sounds good, buddy. Appreciate it. Enjoy what's left of summer.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Jeff Pettersson joining us from the left coast.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of the Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.